You're listening to the Born to Kick-Ass podcast with Matt Tomasi and can be found at borntokickass.com/episode 26.
Welcome to the Born to Kick-Ass podcast, where you're introduced to the most fascinating people on the planet. Learn the ingredients of greatness that you can apply to your life. And now your host, Matthew Tomasi.
Today's podcast is brought to you by audible.com. Get a free audiobook of your choice and a 30-day free trial by visiting borntokickass.com/audible. There's over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. To download your free audiobook today, go to borntokickass.com/audible. Again, that's borntokickass.com/audible for your free audiobook. Gavan Hennigan is an Irish extreme environment athlete. In his day job, Gavan is a deep sea saturation diver, diving to depths of up to 200 metres, performing heavy construction on oil rigs, often spending up to a month at a time underwater. In his downtime, Gavan surfs, snowboards and climbs high-altitude peaks in the Himalayas. Gavan also runs extreme ultramarathons, having recently completed two of the longest and toughest winter ultras on Earth, the 566-kilometre Likeys 6633 Ultra, which is inside the Arctic Circle, and the 500-kilometre Yukon Arctic Ultra. Gavan recently completed a 17-day, 700-kilometre solo expedition traversing the frozen Lake Baikal in Siberia on foot. Gavan also talks about his addiction to drugs throughout his teenage years, as well as a failed suicide attempt and rehab. In December 2016, Gavan will be attempting his biggest challenge to date, rowing 5,000 kilometres solo across the Atlantic Ocean as part of the Talisker Whisky Atlantic Challenge. Enjoy the interview. Gavan Hennigan, thanks for your time today and welcome to the Born to Kick-Ass podcast.
Hey Matt, great to be here.
Now, I've just had a look on Facebook. Yesterday, I believe it was yesterday, you posted a big rowing. Did you go out rowing?
Yeah, I was out on my boat yesterday.
Yeah.
So I did, I think it was nearly 44K. It was a really good row because I'm planning to row the Atlantic at the end of the year and doing a lot of training for it. But it's the boat that I use is mainly a downwind sort of boat that is used for ocean rowing boat, especially for crossing the Atlantic. And yesterday I got some really nice wind and was flying along, kind of surfing the wind chop, sort of 3-foot wind chop, getting up to the 5.5 knots. So it was a lot of fun.
So was that like a 9-hour training session, roughly?
Yeah, that was. Yeah, it was sort of a 9-hour row, and I stopped for breaks here and there. But I was, basically just trying to get out and row as long as possible.
Yeah, I definitely want to get into that bit more. The training leading up to this solo Atlantic Ocean row later on this year.
Yeah,
talk about your training and the actual boat and stuff like that. But before we get into that, you've done a number of extreme ultramarathons. You're an adventurer, snowboarding, and I'd love to touch on all that as well. But before we do, can you give us a background on yourself, where you grew up, and were you sort of active growing up, and maybe give us an insight into your younger years?
Yeah, sure. I grew up. I'm actually in Galway at the moment. I grew up here. Excuse me. I'm from the west coast of Ireland, and I was always into sport as a kid. I was actually quite big into swimming, competitive. swimming as a youth, but I was always into the outdoors, and I think a lot of that stemmed from my home life growing up. I kind of came from a broken family. My father was an alcoholic, and I always used to find solace in the outdoors. We used to live beside this quite a big wood and a river and stuff, and I always used to have these great memories of just kind of out in the woods, wandering about on my own. And I suppose I think, when I look back, that a lot of a lot of the stuff that I've done, stems from that sort of early childhood experiences. Yeah. And growing up, as I said, big time into sports and swimming and stuff like that, and was into that up until the age of about 16. But things kind of went a bit off the tracks when I started drinking, like most normal Irish people and most normal youths. You try a bit of alcohol and dabble in a bit of drugs. But for me, I kind of took it a little bit too far. And started to drink and use drugs quite heavily, and sort of went off the rails. I decided to drop out of school, and just things got pretty bad pretty quickly for me. Started using a lot of drugs that I never really thought I'd start using, and started getting into a lot of trouble, and ended up kind of leaving Ireland at 19 for London, where I spent a couple of years there. And yeah, just a real kind of roller coaster mess of life for a few years, until I ended up in a rehab at 21.
So with the drugs, was this sort of late teens?
Yeah. So from 16 to 21, not a massive amount of time, but as I said, just really got out of control. I was into the dance rave scene in the sort of late 90s, doing a lot of ecstasy and stuff like that, and just started getting more and more out of control, and then started using heroin and cocaine and stuff like that, which is stuff that I'd never dreamt of taking when I was younger. And then I just was really out of control. I was completely powerless really over my behavior and also the amount that I was using. It was a tough time, because it was very hard for me to be aware of what I was doing. I was kind of at the coalface. I was just kind of going from, drug to drug and drink to drink, and just kind of surviving through that. Sort of leaving a bit of a wake of trouble behind me,
What was it? Was there any, like a particular moment that sort of kicked you off to go to rehab, or how did you actually get into rehab?
Yeah, there wasn't really a light bulb moment. I'd been in London, and then I came back, and I was living in London in this flat with another guy who was sort of on the run from Ireland as well, and we were living in. There was no furniture in the place, and it was we had like bean bags and had a TV, sort of kind of small TVs on a box, and I had this little one bed room with a mattress on the ground, and there was no curtains there, and I used to have the windows blacked out with black bags, and I just used to wake up in the morning and it would just be like pitch dark in the room, and I used to love that. I'd just be able to take a hit off the bong and just go back to sleep, or just kind of not really face the world, and I was sort of I had a lot of fear around the world, and again that comes back to like growing up, like the broken home, underneath, everything, even though I was, quite, good at sports, and I did quite well swimming, and I never really did quite too good in school. And I think that was down to the fact that I'm a very kind of one track mind, and I was so into like swimming and sports at the time that I was just so focused on that. But when I started, using drugs and drink, that kind of went out the window. And then, I just basically focused on using the drugs. But going back to, ended up in rehab. I came back from London, and my mother kind of suggested to me, because she had been through a lot of the same stuff with my father, and she put it to me to go in, and I kind of just decided to go for it at the time. It wasn't I didn't really see where my life was going at the time, but I knew deep down that I had no control over what was happening with regards to the amount of drugs I was using, and I was getting pretty crazy in my head, and I was a little bit sort of suicidal at the time as well. I was thinking thinking about trying to kill myself, and then that all really stems from the fact that I was gay, and I couldn't really deal with that. I couldn't really deal with, I hadn't told anyone at this stage. I was probably about 19, 20, and nobody knew about it. And it was kind of keeping that inside. That took up a lot of energy, and just internally was, I had a huge battle with myself, and like living in that little flat in London, it was just a very dark time. I used to there's a mirror in the bathroom, and used to be cracked, because I used to just, when I was go in there and I'd look at myself, I used to just headbutt the window, and I still have scars the top of just inside my forehead, my hair, where used to be bleeding because I'd just be headbutting this mirror every time I walked in there, so I had this kind of intense kind of rage within myself, and it sort of, as I said, didn't really like myself too much, and it all stemmed from, a very low self-esteem, a low self-worth, and just not really knowing what to do, so I kind of just went along with, the guidance or the suggestion at the time, which was to try this rehab, which I did, and kind of just went with it really, just to try and see if it was going to be some sort of solution, and it really was. I kind of didn't know what I was letting myself in for going into it, because it was a tough sort of 6 weeks, but I suppose today I'm testament to that sort of process working.
Just with the rehab, you survived. You said it went for 6 weeks. The actual, thing that you went through. Was that period hard? What was harder to sort of get through, that particular 6 week stint, or once you'd sort of left rehab? And I'm guessing at some point, after you've left rehab, you would have come into contact with drugs again down the track just randomly, or, with people you knew just out and about. Not delving back into drugs at that point. What would have been harder, the actual rehab, or, when you crossed drugs again down the track, not taking that up again?
Yeah, great question, because that's probably that's definitely one of the hardest things for sure. It's, really changing your life. They say that it's like people, places and things that draw you back into that sort of life. And, I remember at the time I literally had to get a new phone, and just every contact that went in there was other people who were involved in those circles with rehab and coming out and staying clean. All the people that I used to hang out with, I just had to kind of walk away from them, at the time, and just start completely new, and that was really tough. And like you said, just coming out and being sort of back into the real world again, sort of with, basically nothing. I was 21. I couldn't drive. I hadn't finished school. I didn't really have any sort of job in that time. And like I was basically like a child again, almost, in a lot of ways, so it was very much, one foot in front of the other. And I went back working on the building sites at the time. I was kind of halfway through an apprenticeship as a bricklayer, and I was a couple of months clean, and I actually got fired. The guy was like, your work isn't up to much. And at the time I just didn't have the concentration. I wasn't able to sort of focus on the job in hand, so I was I think I was a couple of months clean, just got fired. I was supposed to be kind of making this new life, and here I am losing my job, and that threw me down into this hole again. And I did really want to go back and use drugs at the time, but then I kind of knew as well that they weren't the answer. The one thing that they tell you in these rehabs, if we do anything for you, we'll ruin the rest of your drinking and drug using. Because you really realize how kind of pointless, the drink and the drugs is in a lot of ways, because if you end up there in the first place, your head's done a number on you. You've gotten, the drugs aren't working, because if they were working, you wouldn't be there,
Yeah.
So you're faced with that realization that it isn't doing anything, So for me, I kind of, with the kind of extreme attitude that I had, I actually ended up getting a bit more obsessed with the suicide thing, and I kind of had a botched attempt at suicide, a couple of months when I was supposed to be a couple of months clean, after I got fired, I felt like a complete failure, more self-hatred, just kind of crippled really with the whole concept of the addiction thing as well. It was really tough because I was kind of like, I was trying to be perfect as well. I thought, right, I'm going to get clean now and I'm going to get sober and I'm going to have a good life. And then, life on life's terms isn't always, as simple as that. I still had to like really face myself and do a lot of work. And I kind of, said, right, well, I'm going to just top myself now. And, I took a bunch of paracetamol and sleeping tablets, whatever I could find in medical cabinet and my mother's house, and ended up in the psychiatric unit, kind of, well, half sick. And in the psychiatric unit was a very, botched attempt, plea for help sort of thing. Yeah. Spent a week in there or something like that. And, I was kind of almost hoping there was something else wrong with me, that I was depressed. I kind of didn't really want to, face the idea of just being an alcoholic. I kind of wanted to find something a bit more, interesting, or something like, oh, I've got like, some sort of schizophrenia. I don't know what was going through my head at the time, but there wasn't a whole lot wrong with me, except, I just needed to not use drinking drugs, really. I think that was the bottom line. And I just needed to, as I said, put one foot in front of the other. So after that, I had a renewed attempt, at sort of, getting clean, staying clean. And I went back on the dole and just, did the basics, went to the support groups and, going back to what you said there, staying away from the people, and the drugs and stuff that, which I found to be tough, but definitely, the right decision at the time for me, and like just surrounding myself with other people who are not, using it is a huge thing.
After that sort of period in your life, did you then do some traveling? Did you come to Australia? Or Bali? Was it Bali?
Yes, I did this sort of, as I said, one foot in front of the other. Just, I was on the dole. I was, just hanging out and trying to stay clean basically for a period. And then I started surfing in Ireland, which is what opened the door to my new sort of life and the life where I am today. Which was, adventure and, excitement and sport again, because I'd gone away from all that in the alcohol and drug abuse. So I got into surfing here in the west coast of Ireland, and that just really opened up my eyes and, really opened up a part of me that I didn't know was there. It was just and yeah, it was amazing. And from there, I ended up getting a job in like an outdoor shop in Galway. And then I was, surfing like mad, and I just learned to drive, and, things were starting to happen bit by bit. And after 2 years sort of in Ireland, just, I decided I was going to go to Bali. So, I had saved up a little bit of money and was heading off to Bali for, I think it was 3 weeks. And then I ended up staying there for like 6 weeks, just surfing like crazy. And then I just got said, right, what do I want to do now? So, well, I've no point in going back to Ireland. I might as well try and go to Australia, and got a visa online overnight and took off to Perth, which was just the idea of going over there, maybe getting a job in a vineyard and in Margaret River or a building site, and just making a bit of money and coming back to Bali to surf. But then I got there, and I'd done a bit of scuba diving in Bali, and that was really cool. And I heard about this job, which is commercial diving, and somebody told me about it, and I just kind of was like in awe of this idea that people went down, diving down on the side of oil rigs or doing construction underwater. And I just thought that sounded absolutely gnarly, and I said, I just have to try and do that, or I need to find out more. So, just by chance, obviously I was in Perth because it was the closest place to Bali, cheapest flight, and there was a training school there in Fremantle. So I went down and had a look, and, found out about the course, and just thought, wow, I gotta do this, I have to do it. So, I got a loan off my sister at the time for this very expensive 3-month kind of all intensive diving course. And then I got stuck into that, and At the time, people were saying, I'd asked a bit of advice, and a couple of people had said to me, oh, diving's a tough industry now. There isn't as much work as you'd think. I probably wouldn't do it. But I didn't really listen to any of them. I just was like, I have to do this. This sounds like the coolest thing in the world. Yep. And I just completely went with it. And I did this course, and then as soon as I finished the course, which was 2005. It was when Hurricane Katrina happened in the Gulf of Mexico, which, devastating hurricane, destroyed a lot of the oil platforms. So at the time, it created a huge amount of work. A lot of the divers, experienced divers, left Australia, left Southeast Asia, went to work over there. So as soon as I came out of school, there was a huge demand for divers. And I literally, 2 weeks after I finished school, I was on a plane to India to work on the east coast of India on a job. And so I was, thrown into the deep end. Really, I was working offshore, nearly on a rig, diving down. Not hadn't a clue what I was doing, but people allowed for that, and I was straight in there. And just one thing led to another. Worked there, just stayed offshore for like 3 months there. Just didn't want to go home. Basically, they asked me, did I want to leave, and I said no, I'm fine. I'll just stay. And the money was coming in. I wasn't spending any money, and I was learning a bit of my trade. And then after that, I moved to Bali, pretty much, which is what I wanted to do. It was a kind of dream come true, really, to be able to live in Bali. And then I was getting work around Southeast Asia. So I spent, the next couple of years just getting experience, diving, air diving, and then just surfing on my time off in Bali. It was amazing.
So just to paint a picture for listeners, when you say diving, it's not like putting on a, like a tank and then diving from the surface down 30 meters or so, is it? What was it? The diving you did was way more specialized. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so it's commercial diving. So it's there isn't really. We do wear a tank, but it's like a backup. But our main supply is from an umbilical. So we wear like a diving helmet. So it's like a proper fully enclosed helmet. It's
like
pretty
like the real old school.
Yeah, sort of like that, but a newer version. And then we dive off the side of the vessel, but that would be what's called air diving. So I would have done that for a couple of years first. So I did that all around Asia and Middle East and stuff. And then after you get a certain amount of hours, you qualify to do what's called saturation diving. So saturation diving is a technique used to dive to deeper depths, anything beyond 50 meters up to sort of over 200 meters in depth. And it's where you are pressurized inside a chamber. So we'd get inside a chamber, which would be on a boat or a barge, and then they compress us to the depth that we're working at. So if you're, obviously 100 meters, you're at 100 meters inside the chamber. It's just pressure, and then from that chamber, which is like a living environment, it has like bunk beds, and then there's like a compartment for shower and toilet. Then it leads into another chamber called a transfer under pressure, where you get inside a diving bell, which is another chamber essentially, and that winches away or comes away from the main system, drops down to the bottom, and then you get out and go to work. And there's usually a couple of guys, well, 3 in a team. 2 guys get out and work, and 1 guy stays in the bell. You do rotate through that every day. And then you're down underwater at, like, as I said, 150, 200 meters sometimes. Working on the pipes and the manifolds and doing the heavy construction tasks. And then you come back to the diving bell, and then you're taken back up into the system, and then that's you sleep and eat in there. So you spend up to 28 days at a time inside this small chamber, which is not very roomy and not very comfortable in a lot of ways. But again, I ate that stuff up. I just thought it was cool. I thought it was an amazing challenge to do that, and obviously the money was very good as well. So as soon as I got my hours, I went and did that course. And again, it was a busy time around 2008. And as soon as I finished my course again for that, I picked up some work. I think I was in like Libya or somewhere, so I was flown over to the Mediterranean. I was diving there, and then come off that job, and I went straight to Azerbaijan in the Caspian Sea. And there was a big company doing a very heavy construction, deep water job up there in the Caspian. And I was very, very green, little experience, but they put me in anyway. And it was like working at 200 meters, and we were doing these pipelines were 40, 50 inches in diameter. We're hooking up, nuts and bolts that weigh like 100 kilos each. Yeah, and it's, working at that depth is pretty hardcore. It's like if you can imagine the pressure, you don't feel pressure is exerted equally through liquid as a rule of physics. So essentially, we don't feel it in our tissues or most of our body, but you'd feel that in your lungs, because your lungs the pressure's trying to close your lungs. So every time you take a breath, you fill up your lungs, and then the pressure would be trying to close your lungs again, so you're working at like 200 meters. If you get out of breath, it's really hard to get your breath back, because every time you take a breath in, it just closes it again really quickly, and then your reaction is to open it again, to try and get a bigger breath. So it's quite intensive, especially down there with lugging around bolts that weigh 100 kilos and putting these big pipes together. So
you actually, like, when you're 200 meters down, you've got this. Do you have like a helmet on?
Yeah,
that's attached to the main sort of capsule type thing.
Yeah, so the diving bell hangs down below the diving ship, and then it's probably about 10 meters from the bottom. Then we're tethered to that via our umbilical. So our umbilical has our communication lines, our gas, our hot water, because we're wearing basically a wetsuit that has tubes all over it, and it squirts hot water on us. So that goes back to the diving bell. Inside the diving bell, there'd be one of the other divers. He monitors things, and he gets the guys ready to dive, and then he basically just sits there for a few hours while we're out working. And then there's like a main umbilical that goes back to the ship. So all of our communications, we've got like cameras on our helmets and lights, so we know we're communicating with each other all the time. We're communicating with a supervisor who's in like a control room inside the dive control. And then he has kind of full control of everything from there. He talks to the ship. If we need to move the ship, he'll move it. If he needs to talk to the riggers on the back deck, they're operating the crane, they're lowering down equipment, so it's kind of like a command center. But yeah, we're at most we can only go sort of 50 meters from the diving bell, because that's as much as our umbilical allows, and that's our lifeline. So, constantly we're checking our umbilical, you don't want it to be getting snagged under something, because the boat works on what's called a dynamic positioning. So there's no anchors. So it has thrusters, which are just basically propellers the whole way around the sides of the front and the back and the sides. And they just hold the vessel in a position like a GPS position, so it can be an exact position. We can say to the supervisor, okay, I need to move the vessel, 2 foot or 2 meters to port, and it'll move that little bit, and it'll stay in like a certain footprint, So it's it's a pretty intensive sort of operation, and you've got 100 people on one of these boats, and obviously the ship crew, and then everyone else involved, and then there's a remote operated vehicle, an ROV, which is like basically like a little remote controlled spaceship. Well, some of them are quite big, they're heavy duty, and they do heavy duty work as well. They've got manipulator arms on them, so they're flying around down there. Usually you've got like one that might be working with us also, and then there might be like an observation one just watching us. And yeah, it's as I said, pretty intensive. There's everyone's kind of watching you the whole time. There's this you've got the cameras from the supervisor, then you got the cameras from the ROV looking at you. All these pictures are on widescreen televisions inside the vessel. Some of them are even being back to shore. And these vessels cost $200,000, $300,000 a day. And then there's 2 guys in the water, and they're sometimes shutting down huge production for us to come in and do work, so it's, not only is it a high pressure environment in regards to the depth of the water, but it's a very, very high pressure job, in that, you're performing tasks that need to get done. And if you're messing around trying to tie a knot, or you've dropped a spanner and you're looking for it in the mud, it's all seen, and it's, you've got to sort of perform under that sort of pressure.
Is there lights as well? Do you have sort of lights, like headlamps or something, sort of attached to your helmet? Or
yeah.
Can you see down there?
Yeah. We've got lights, LED lights on the helmet, so we can see pretty good. Those sort of depths, usually in the North Sea or anything fairly deep. It's usually good visibility, but there's no natural light down there. Anything beyond sort of 150 meters, it's just pitch dark all the time. And then the diving bell itself has lights, so that's, you know, kind of got kind of floodlights almost. You can always kind of, you know, be able to, you can usually see the diving bell from where you're working, you know, and that gives you a good idea. There's actually lights along the side of it, so you have an idea of where you are in relation to the ship. So you know, if there's one side, is, you know, port side or starboard side has you know, different sets of lights, so you're able to see where you are, so you can tell, you know, you'll be able to know your positioning and how far you are away, etc. But yeah, I've worked plenty in sort of, you know, the Nigerian Delta and in sort of India, where, you know, you're working in mud pretty much up to your waist. You can't see anything at all. You're just doing everything by feel, and that's kind of interesting. It's that'd
be full on. Do you ever get claustrophobia, or have you sort of gone past that sort of stage?
Yeah, I don't know. I did have it as a kid. I remember getting locked in this, I think it was a boot, you know, when I was a kid, and I went, you know, absolutely lost the plot. But yeah, I've kind of gone through it. And I suppose I've always trying to be looking, wondering why or how, because I've never really gotten too flustered in those situations, but I've kind of just been accepting of the situation that I'm in, you know, and kind of just, you know, try and let go as much as possible, you know. And I think, you know, early on when I was diving, you know, when you're air diving before the saturation, if you dive down to 50 meters, quite quickly you will get nitrogen narcosis, because, you know, I didn't get into this in the saturation diving. We don't use air, you know. Normally people dive on air, but we dive with heliox, which is a helium oxygen mixture. So it's a completely different gas to air, you know. And then at those depths, the deep depths, we're breathing probably 98% helium, because you can't breathe 21%. Right now we're breathing 21% oxygen, which is, you know, the makeup of air, and 78% nitrogen. So diving with air at those depths, like it would just kill you. But diving, say, like 40, 50 meters, you still use air, but nitrogen is quite narcotic at that depth. And I used to get pretty out of it early on, and then also throw in not being able to see anything. You know, if you're diving down to 50 meters and, you know, in the mud, and you really, really start to see stars. So
yeah. Now, so this is your day job.
Yeah, that's what I've done for the last 10 years. Yeah.
So like when you're describing this, I'm sort of picturing, for some reason, I'm picturing scenes from, you know, the movie Aliens. You know, like you got these almost like astronauts, like, but in your case, deep sea divers. You know, like, yeah, like, you know, like on an alien landscape with, you know, tethered to like a spaceship. And
yeah.
How big's the bell? Is it sort of like the size of a hotel room, or is it bigger or smaller?
It's very small. It's I think it's volume. It's about 6 meters cubed. So it's basically room for, you know, 3 men to stand up in.
And you're in that for up to 28 days?
That's the bell. So that's the bell that goes down, and then that's just what takes us to the bottom. That's our sort of the diving bell. But then the actual the living chambers, they're as big as a small hotel room. You know, as a large bathroom, for example. You know, it's just a tubular. You know, might be, you know, about the same size as my boat, actually. It's sort of, you know, it's got kind of bunk beds at one end, and then there's like a little living area with just, you know, room for a little table, and then there's a compartment for a toilet and shower. And, you know, you haven't got you can't put your arms above your head, really. It's, you know, you don't have that full headroom, so it's tiny, really. You know, it's, you know, when you first go in, there's almost like a little cabin fever, where you're like, oh God, have I really got to stay in here for this amount of time? But then, you know, you just adapt to that environment. You become part of it. And I think that's a lesson for me in everything that I do, which is just, it doesn't matter what I encounter, like I will adapt to it, like every situation. And I just know that from the diving, like I have had that huge fear of like, oh my God, what am I doing inside this chamber? And then, like, you know, a week later, like that's my world. Like it doesn't matter. I'm fine in there. I've adapted, so that's kind of what I take into everything that I do nowadays with the ultra marathons, with the row. I know that I can adapt to whatever environment it is and just be completely at home there eventually.
I'm guessing the hazard pay is pretty good.
Yeah. No, it's great money. That's it wasn't, I wasn't motivated by the money at all. When I first got into it, it's not, I'm not motivated financially by a lot of things. I was into the adventure. I was into the, a lot of my desires and have stemmed from just, I want to go check that out. I want to see what it's like down there. I wanted to see what it was like down 200 meters. I wanted to be down there 200 meters in the Caspian Sea, looking at sturgeon that are like, 9 foot long. And, I wanted to be, on the side of a rig in the North Sea, covered in marine life and, seeing sharks and all sorts of stuff. So, that's the same. I want to go and see what it's like to be surfing 40-foot waves in a boat in the middle of the Atlantic. It's just how, it's how it all begins, Yeah.
So with that work environment that you're exposed to regularly, has that been like training? Have you sort of developed mental toughness, from your day-to-day work that you have drawn upon in some of the ultra marathons that you've done?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think, mentally, I think diving is, the sort of living conditions, what we have to endure mentally is, it just has stood to me and will stand to me for the rest of the stuff that I do. Again, I'm in this chamber. There's no way getting out really, because, going back to that more of explanation around it, you have to decompress to get out of a chamber, and it takes like 200 meters takes, or 8-9 days to come back, so once you're in, there's no way getting out. You can want to get out, but it's going to take you 8-9 days. So again, it's just, going with that and it's just being accepting of the fact that that's what you're involved in, and, having your sort of dignity taken away. There's cameras on you the whole time. And then obviously dealing with the pressures, like I was talking about, the job and all that as well. And then, learning to live with other people who you might particularly like, or some of them you do, some of them you don't, and just, not sort of, wanting too much, just getting on with it. So that's all that sort of stuff. I suppose it is, people say it's mental toughness, and yeah, it definitely is. And I've definitely used that. And part of me was thinking to myself, well, let's go out and try these ultra marathons and, do this Atlantic row or, any of the other adventures. And let's see if the diving, if my mentality can hold up, and so far it has, and it's so, it's invaluable experiences,
What about your colleagues, your work colleagues? Do they, on their time, like for you, on your time off, you do mountaineering, you do ultra marathons, you're going to row across the Atlantic Ocean. This is in your downtime.
Yeah.
What about your workmates? What do they do when they come back to dry land? Do they just, any of those guys also of the same, cut from the same cloth? Like, are they also into extreme sports, adventures, or are they do they just sort of blend back into society, when they come back up from the depths?
Yeah, drinking and whoring. That's probably
right.
the main activity for divers. It's a real mixed bunch. It's very. I love divers. They're just such a mixed bunch. You've got guys who are completely normal. You wouldn't on the street. You'd just be like, is that, you wouldn't think he's a diver or anything, like that. Then you've got sort of, complete roughnecks who are, ex-special forces, legionnaires,
Right.
People who've done some pretty incredible things. And then you've got those guys like me who are off doing cool stuff, like what I'm doing. So it is a real mixed bunch. But yeah, definitely you've got to have a few screws loose if you want to get into diving.
So let's move on to some of the other stuff you've done, I guess, outside of diving. What were you sort of into early days in terms of the, the adventure side of stuff. Was it sort of snowboarding that you were into first, or mountaineering? What sort of came first out of those two?
Surfing, actually. So yeah, surfing here in Ireland, and then moving to Australia and Bali. So I was and then doing trips through that. But then I started snowboarding. A couple of years into the diving, I started making good money. So getting away for that. So those sort of holidays wasn't too bad. But that just really opened up things for me, because I hadn't spent that much time in the mountains in my life, and it was just incredible. I just this sense of space, and I was just mesmerized, really. So that really took over, and I started doing more and more trips snowboarding, and I went to Canada and I started to do splitboarding, which is a snowboard that comes in two and turns into a pair of touring skis, where you're able to go walk into the backcountry and climb a mountain, basically, and then snowboard down it. And I love surfing, but I really got annoyed with the crowds and all that sort of stuff. And I think with regards to getting out and being on my own, or being with a group of people, that's what the splitboarding did, because it just opened up so much, to get away from the ski lifts as well. So that was a big thing for me then. For quite a number of years, I did some incredible trips. I was I spent a whole season, a whole winter in Canada, where I had rented an RV and drove 12,000 kilometers around British Columbia and then up into Alaska, and did these incredible trips in the backcountry camping. And then it ended with us, me and a friend, getting flown by a small plane into the backcountry, into the wilderness. We brought all our supplies and set up a base camp for 3 weeks, and camped on a glacier, and went around and climbing every day, and splitboarding and summiting these peaks and snowboarding down off them. So it was just stuff like that. And then I went
you were in like completely remote areas.
Yeah, completely.
Good.
Yeah, in the middle of nowhere. Basically had a sat phone. It was our only contact with our pilot and the outside world. Brought all our supplies, stove and food and everything, and set up a camp, and just sort of worked from there. And we were, we trained in glacial rescue as well. Obviously, we were walking around on it's all glaciated terrain up there in Alaska, and walking around on glaciers and roped up, and then climbing a lot of peaks and snowboarding them. It was just a mind-blowing experience, really, to be out there in the Northern Lights and seeing all that sort of stuff. It was amazing. So
what sort of time of year was this? Was it like winter?
Yeah, it was coming into it was spring. So I went over to Canada in January. We got this RV and then drove all over British Columbia in kind of January, February, and then slowly started making our way north as spring came, as the days got longer, and then got the ferry up to Alaska, to Haines in southeast Alaska, where we got the pilot to fly us into the it's actually a national park. Glacier Bay National Park is actually right on the coast, and it gets some of the biggest amounts of snowfall in the world there. It's right on the Pacific Ocean. Basically, you can see down to the fjords where the glaciers end, and you're just, it's just going out to the Pacific. And so, we planned to spend a few weeks there. We had enough supplies, but we had to wait for a weather window to get in there, so we're basically, we're staying in this RV in the parking lot of this little small airport, and, the waiting for the weather to clear so the pilot could fly us in, and basically he came banging on our door one morning. It was like, right, we're going right now, load up the plane, so we've been waiting there for about 4 or 5 days. We pile all our stuff into the small plane. It's got like skis on it, that it can land. It can barely fit, 3 people in it, and all our gear. And he flew us in, and we're like flying around looking for a spot to land. Basically, we just flying around these mountains and glaciers, just looking at the terrain, going, right, that looks good there. Maybe we can, climb that, or does this look like a good glacier? There isn't too many crevasses. Looking for a nice flat glacier where you can land, obviously, and then where we can set up camp. We've got good access to the surrounding terrain. So we're actually quite mesmerized by the peaks there. We're trying to find it hard to make a decision, and eventually we found a spot and landed there, and set up camp for, as I said, 3 weeks.
How much of a risk was bears and wolves? Did you see any at that time of year? In spring, as the warmer weather comes in, and a lot of the animals in that part of the world start to come out of hibernation. Did you see any bears at all, or wolves? Are they sort of the main sort of animals that you need to look out for?
Yeah, bears for sure. But we had some bear spray, but I think we were there. It was still probably a little bit too cold. Maybe it was probably because it's quite far north there. So we were probably at the end of March. So we might have just missed them, I think, because when we got out, things really started to warm up, sort of coming into the middle of April. But yeah, we did have bear spray, but it wasn't a big worry. I've been to Svalbard in the Arctic on a splitboard trip also. We were carrying flare guns and rifles with us at all times there because polar bears were the real fear there, But as regards to grizzlies and stuff, there wasn't any. We didn't see any. But coming back, actually, we drove back from Alaska to Vancouver in one go, which was a few days trip in the middle of April, and we definitely saw a lot of brown bears anyway. Black bears. Coming out of hibernation on the roads and stuff.
So is there a particular type of bear that's more aggressive than another? Like polar bears versus black bears or grizzly bears or brown bears? Is there like a bear? Are they all full on that you just need to watch your back?
Oh, like the sort of black bear is the most common one as far as I know. And they're all over the place in Canada and America, and in the spring they're sort of we actually saw one up a tree, like really high up a tree, just sleeping in a tree. They're not that big. Yeah. You wouldn't want to go near them, but look, a grizzly is something I don't want to see, and and a polar bear obviously, they're
that'd be full
crazy. Yeah, they're not something I want to encounter. They're just gonna definitely want to eat you. Even though we did see one when I was in Svalbard, but we were quite far away. We were on a boat as well, so as regards to the black bears, I wasn't too worried about them.
Now you've also got into ice climbing. What's that like?
Yeah, it's actually really tough. I've done a bit of I've gotten into the mountaineering through the splitboarding. So obviously we're climbing to get to the top of these peaks and then snowboard down, so it's kind of like a hybrid kind of mountaineering snowboard kind of thing. And then I've dabbled in some mountaineering, kind of separate sort of alpinism in the Alps and also in Nepal. So I've climbed a number of routes around the Chamonix area. I've climbed Mont Blanc, and I've climbed a few ice routes in around there, and it's tough. It's very scary and hard being on a vertical wall of ice. Just with your crampons on and the ice axes. It's definitely a challenging thing. I haven't put a lot of time into it, but it's definitely something that would warrant a big dedication to go a bit further with that. But I had to use that. Quite a bit in Nepal. I climbed Amadablam, which is 6,800 meters, and there's definitely a few close to vertical pitches of ice high up there above 6,000 meters. So throw in the altitude on top of that, it was an absolute lung buster.
I'm thinking the training for ice climbing, that'd be like heaps of chin ups and lat work and forearms.
Yeah,
that'd be pretty full on.
Yeah, I do a lot of gym stuff. I've always sort of in the last sort of number of years I've done a lot of training on the side. I'm a bit of a gym rat at times, and I do enjoy a few pull-ups. So that definitely helps. I definitely look after myself in that regard, and body weight exercises are hugely important for me. and staying strong in the shoulders and being able to move my own body is really important. So yeah, like I definitely think that stood to me, with the ice climbing. But again, it's the techniques involved in that. Like you've got to trust the crampons, that you've made a good foothold, and not carry too much tension on the body, because you will completely burn yourself out. Especially your grip with the ice axe. Your forearms really start to go. If you're not kind of getting a solid hit on the ice, and then trying to relax the arm and trying to just breathe through it.
Now, you mentioned gym. Has gym been a constant thing for you throughout the years?
Yeah,
in terms
absolutely.
of keeping your strength and conditioning up, and has that been like a constant thing?
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of strength training, strength and conditioning. Okay, maybe you'll call me an endurance athlete. Obviously, yeah, doing stuff like ultramarathons and stuff like that, and run the Atlantic is definitely endurance. But like I'll still be doing probably 3 strength sessions a week. Squatting, deadlifting, and shoulder press. I think even as a health marker, I think being strong, I think, is really important. There's definitely some studies out there that can prove it. I think having an all round sort of look at things. Yeah. So being strong, as well as being able to move my own body weight, pick things up. So I've definitely gotten into a lot of CrossFit stuff over the years, even though I'm not doing it as much as I used to, because I kind of started to go away from the idea of doing all out stuff all the time, which is kind of what CrossFit is. But I definitely use a lot of the elements from that, and just do a lot of strength work, and then mobility as well, which is something that I'm really trying to do, which is quite tough, because I'm not very flexible, but I have to really look after myself at the moment. I'm 35, I'm not getting any younger, and I'm trying to row across the Atlantic at the end of the year, so I need to look after my posterior chain, like my lower back, my hips, and that sort of area, because like being sat in a seat like that all day, and the same thing, running an ultramarathon, or doing a number of miles, like it's going to beat you up, so you got to really look after yourself. So being strong is important. As I said, like you can't, I've never had any knee problems, and you can't strengthen your knees, but you can strengthen your quads and your calves and everything around it. So I think if you have a good buffer of muscle, it will support the sort of joints, and the hips and the knees, and I think that's hugely important.
Now, you've done a number of ultras in recent years. What one do you want to talk about? Like, you've done there's a lot of these ultras that you've done, like in the extreme cold.
Yeah.
So you've done the Arctic Ultra. So was that in 2015? Is that the 6633? Is that?
Yeah. So that was last year. 2015. I kind of, it's funny. I didn't. I've not done a lot of running per se before that. Like I'd always ran 5Ks as training, and done a little bit longer, and I've always enjoyed sort of obviously the mountaineering that comes with that, is like hiking, and I'd done bits and pieces of trail running, but I just decided I was going to sign up for this 350 mile ultramarathon, 566K. I was in the chamber at work, and I found this article. I think it was like a Red Bull thing, the 10 hardest races on the planet, and this was one of them, and it just really jumped out at me. I don't know why. It was just it was held quite far north in the Canada. I'd spent time there before. It really appealed to me. So I sent this guy an email, the owner and the organizer of Likeys is actually a shop in Wales. The guy Martin Like organises it. He's been doing it since 2007, and there's been very little finishers, and there's actually a 120 mile race and a 350. Yeah. So I actually got in touch. I said, look, I have no experience in this sort of stuff, and I kind of told him a bit of my background, and he just said, look, you sound like the perfect sort of person to be entering this, like, because it was more of an expedition. It's more of an expedition race than like an ultramarathon, I suppose. you really have to look after yourself. It's 566k. It's nonstop. You're pulling a sled behind you. All your supplies. There is aid stations and checkpoints. Every 50 miles or something like that. So it really just appealed to me sort of as a sort of challenge and adventure, as opposed to like a marathon or sort of a different sort of organized race. So yes, I just said, hey, I knew I was going to be getting a couple of months off work just previous to it, because we're quiet. We were usually quiet during the winter. So this race was March. I signed up for it in, I think, November, December. I got off work, and then I just had this crazy obsession to train for this race and go to Canada. And I actually signed up for the 120 because I thought I can't do 350. It's just mind-bogglingly too long. 566 kilometers is just ridiculously long. Like, how could anyone do that? But I started to train and just to basically see how far I could push myself with regards to training. When I was training, dragging a tire around, and I was out and about here in the west of Ireland in the middle of December, which is not a nice place to be. There's not a lot of light. It's, we get about 7 hours of light, 8 hours of light, sideways rain. It's not very much snow. So it's very hard to train really for those sort of temperatures. And the race was held, basically starts just below the Arctic Circle. The reason they call it the 663, that's the lines of longitude and latitude that you cross over where the Arctic Circle is. And then it goes all the way along this highway, which wasn't really a highway. It's more of like a forest track, through the sort of wilderness, and then onto the ice roads. They're made famous by the program Ice Road Truckers that you might have seen on Discovery. And then the last third of it is on these ice roads, and then it finishes in Tuktoyaktuk, which is an Inuit village right on the banks of the Arctic. So I just was like, wow, this sounds incredible, like in a crazy adventure. But then it was also one of the reasons that appealed to me, because I'd heard it's quite mentally tough, because there's a lot of like really long straight roads. Like, you get onto these ice roads and they're just straight and wide
to the horizon.
Yeah, so I just thought, wow, this is kind of cool. I wonder, and then go back to what I was saying earlier. Like, I thought, well, this is a good way to test my mettle. See if the diving has done anything for me. So yeah, I got completely obsessed with this race. I got all the gear and all the cold weather stuff. I'd down jackets and stuff I would have had before from the climbing and the snowboarding, but got some extra like windstopper underwear and sort of balaclavas, and had all this stuff, and had in a sled that I was pulling behind me. So I took off to Canada to do this race, and I had, as I said, I'd entered the 120, but I had the option of continuing. So as soon as I kind of got out there and I started, I kind of knew I was going to go all the way. I just decided that I'm gonna try and finish the whole thing. So I kind of took it easy to begin with, but slowly got into the race, and I ended up finishing it in 7.5 days. And it was quite a shock to the system overall, because I got incredibly sleep deprivated after a few days. I was taking a lot of caffeine supplements, tablets, and I was not sleeping very well. And also, I think my body was in this like heightened alert state where I couldn't really rest well. I was just like go, and just tried to keep moving all the time, and ended up getting very, very little sleep over the 7.5 days.
So that time of year that you did that, was that what time of year was that?
That was March. Up that far north inside the Arctic Circle.
That sort of autumn?
Sorry, no, that's basically winter still. Really, it is technically.
So it'd be pretty dark, would it? No,
just then it's starting to get light. So they obviously they hold it. I think at that time it was coming up to. Well, you're into spring, even though it's still minus 30, minus 40. But there is light there. Like it would have been dark there 24/7 around December, but then after the solstice they gain quite a lot back. So I think we had about 10 or 11 hours of light. So it was a normal enough sort of day. Like we'd have a full day of light and then a night, But up there, the Northern Lights are just incredible. It was quite an experience. Wandering along in the middle of the night, pretty sleep deprived. Looking at these Northern Lights, and I've done a lot of drugs in the past, a lot of acid, and this was like better than any drug, So if anyone's looking for a real trip, go and do one of these ultra marathons up there. Get sleep deprived, and you'll start seeing things.
Yeah, that'd be good. So you went pretty much from a 5K, doing 5K runs randomly, to a 350 mile race above the Arctic Circle.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, I don't do progression, I don't have that mentality. Like, it's really interesting because I've been kind of running into a lot of that lately. People are asking me about the row, and people are like, so, what have you done rowing wise? And, yesterday I did, 9 hours, but I'm going to be rowing like 3,000 nautical miles, which is 5,000 kilometers. Like, I'm not going to do anything near that in my training, like, and people have this, rightly so, they have this idea that, okay, I'm going to do a 5K and then I'll do a 10K, like a 10K run. And then, eventually I'll do a marathon, and then maybe I'll do an ultra marathon, and maybe someday I'll work up to doing 100 miles, but I don't think like that. I just think, just throw yourself into the deep end, just go for it. It doesn't matter. You'll learn on the fly. You can adapt to the situation, whatever it is. Like I've, as I said, people are really, I've got a lot of people questioning me about the row, and they're kind of like, they've got these doubts, and I just think to myself, wow, they're never going to do anything near what I'm going to do, because if you spend all day doing the progression, like if I think, all right, I'm going to just do a little bit of rowing here and rowing there, like it'll take me 20 years to row the Atlantic, I'm just going to do what I can, and then I'm going to get out there and I'm going to get stuck in, and I'm going to finish it, and I'm going to adapt to the situation, and I'm going to, and a part of that as well is ignorance is bliss. I don't know how bad it's going to be, because I haven't experienced, rowing 16 hours a day for 3 weeks straight, knowing that I've still got another 5 weeks of that ahead of me, that ignorance is bliss is a valuable asset for anybody, like I always admire people who basically do the same thing over and over again. You've got people who are like running marathons, like hundreds of marathons, and they just do the same race over and over again. And I think to myself, well, that would bore me to death, but I also think it's incredibly mentally tough of them, because just to repeat the same stuff over and over again, maybe they are improving, maybe they aren't, but it's just like knowing that sort of like level of pain, and then just keep going back to it. I always try, that's why I always vary what I do, like I've done these couple of ultra marathons, and I suppose, the progression within that would be, say, for me to do like a longer one, like there's one called the I did a Rod Trail Invitational, which is 1,000 miles, and yeah, I'd love to do that, but I've gone completely off on a tangent now, and I'm like rowing across an ocean, so like I like the way my life is, that I like that it's so unpredictable, like I can't, you're not going to be able to say, well, what's Gavin going to be doing in 5 years, like I can tell you, I've got ultra running friends or mountain biking friends or surfing friends. I can tell you what they're going to be doing in 5 years. They're going to be doing, some other ultra, or they're going to be, skiing or mountain biking here. What am I going to be doing? Man, sky's the limit, really. It's like, I could be working an office job because I've got no money, or I could be back diving, or I could be doing some other crazy idea like that has come into my head, So I suppose when you take away the identity, which is a huge thing for me, and sort of defining myself, and what I learned in the past is, and I learned it through the diving and everything, was that I did have a huge identity around the water. I was a swimmer as a kid, and then I got into the surfing, and then I was like diving, and I was, I had that identity. It was like the water's in my blood. I'm an ocean person, I'm a water person. And then I went snowboarding, and I used to have these like kind of guilty pangs where I was like, man, why am I surfing? I should be surfing. Now I'm off in the mountains, And it was like I had this. I saw it as like I had like an identity crisis, because I was so attached to that idea that I was a water person, and I'm a mountain person as well. I'm everything. Everything's available to me. I'm not defining myself along strong lines. So I've kind of let go of the idea that I'm anything. Like, people call me like an ultra runner or an ocean rower, and it's like, yeah, that's fine, but I'm a mountaineer. I can be whatever. It doesn't really. I don't attach any sort of idea to it. Sorry, I've completely waffled on there, but you might get what I'm talking about.
Yeah. So where do you think the way you see the world, where do you think that stemmed from? Like you say you don't really identify with being an ultra runner or a mountaineer or whatever. Do you think by viewing the world without having any preconceived notions of whatever, where do you think that has sort of come from?
I suppose a lot of it would stem from like the Buddhism stuff that I've kind of been into. I've dipped in and out of some of that stuff. I wouldn't really call myself a Buddhist. I just, listened to a few podcasts, read a couple of books, and I just like the idea of that sort of, let go and just go with the flow. And I suppose I'd be a bit more of an existentialist kind of Buddhist in regards to like what exactly is happening in regards to control and, how much control we really have or how much control I really have over my life. I'm very much go with the flow. I believe in obviously taking action in regards to things, but for example, with the row, I read a book, and, just thought, wow, that sounds cool. We'd be into that. And then I just kind of went with it. And now I'm kind of, in that process, and I just trust the sort of process that I'm in and trust the path that I'm on. And I know that, something will happen. And if it doesn't, something else will happen. I think it's a tough kind of place to be, because I think we all as humans or, people in the modern world, we are attached to the idea of some sort of security around what's going to happen, that if I do X, Y, and Z, then things are going to be okay, but I kind of like the idea, the Buddhism thing of just kind of being okay with the chaos. And that's kind of a big kind of lesson within that, is that, we don't know what's going to happen. Like, there isn't anybody currently right now that can tell me for sure exactly what happens when we die. Like, nobody knows that for a fact, so, everyone can have beliefs, whether you believe nothing happens, whether you believe you go to heaven, wherever that is, or, so everyone has an idea, but there isn't really a certainty. So, my thought process is, well, look, I just don't know. And I just my whole life has been about trying to be okay with that, trying to be okay with the idea of not knowing what's going to happen, being okay with the uncontrollables, and then obviously coming back to, what do I do have control over, within moment to moment basis, which is, obviously the Buddhism thing, which is trying to live in the here and now and trying to, just sort of be attentive to the moment we're in.
So do you think you found yourself through all these ultra marathons that you've done, that particularly those times when you're really struggling and, you've had to let go of yourself, you've had to let go of your mind, you've had to let go of your identity, being, identifying with being Gavan, that process of letting go through extreme suffering and pushing yourself beyond what you thought was possible. By putting yourself in those situations, have you found yourself?
Absolutely. I just go back to that, the Likeys ultramarathon, which we were talking about. And, I was 5 days in, and we were on this section of ice road where it was, it had warmed up a little bit during the day, where it had melted a bit of the ice and it had become quite slippery. So I had to put on these like ice spikes, and my feet were so blistered. And then just putting on these kind of spikes, which were like a elasticated sort of thing and put pressure on my feet. So my feet were just throbbing in an agony. And I was, I was basically suffering, from everything, sleep deprivation, everything was sore. I could barely walk. And I was trying to do sections without these ice spikes on, and I kept slipping and like just slamming on the ice. And, I ended up just crying my eyes out. I was just in that much, despair. And I suppose I just had a few moments where I just felt, I felt completely horrible in one sense, but I was trying to just accept, just being forced to accept the moment, being forced to accept what was happening. And through that, I think I found a really good connection to the planet, and I think, that's it was a huge lesson for me. I think nowadays there's so much disconnect, and I'm I'll put my hand up. I'm definitely one of the people involved in that, with the internet, the phones, don't get me wrong, there's huge advantages to it, but like there's a huge disconnect, and like at that moment I learned a lot about the connection, and the connection for me was that I am part of the planet, like inexorably I am part of it. Like I can't, and everything around me is as well. And, it's nice to feel that part of nature. And I think, it's very hard to, sort of exist kind of just when you're driving around in your car and, you just get caught up in your mind about, money and financial stuff and, comparing yourself to other people and stuff like that. And sometimes when you get out and you're, for me, it took me to go do it, one of the craziest ultra marathons on the planet. Like I'm sure lying in a hammock eating some soft cheese might be an easier way to do it, or doing some yoga or something. But yeah, look, it took me to go out there to really realize that I am 100% part of this planet. And I felt so connected, in some of those moments, despite, what was going on within me. And yeah, that's an incredible experience. I suppose, I do chase that in a lot of ways in what I'm doing, and if it's going to happen on the Atlantic, I'm I'm not going to be able to get away from it again. It's going to happen in the future. So it's just the way it is, and I really enjoy it.
Are you would you say you're spiritual?
Yeah, I'd say I am. I some days I don't know what that means, but other days, I suppose I do. I'd say I call myself more of a seeker. I do ask the questions. The big questions to myself, to the world around me. I look around me and I just think, well, what are you doing? What am I doing? What's going on here? Like, why are we all running around? Chasing what? What are we all chasing? Like, what am I chasing? Like, what am I trying to prove to myself about, all these ultra marathons? Like, am I just testing myself? Is it an ego run? There's definitely ego there. I don't deny it, like I like people to think I'm a little bit crazy and cool. Like when I used to do, sometimes I think nothing's really changed in me. Like when I used to do drugs, I used to be the guy who used to go out and do the most ease, I'd be like ecstasy. I'd be taking like 10, 15 pills a night, completely out of my head, people used to be calling me, oh, Gav's like crazy. And I used to just love that, and now it's like people are calling Gav crazy because he's like doing stuff. And I kind of love that as well. But, I suppose we try and find purpose in what we do. And for me, again, it comes back to, I suppose, my story from, the suicide, the drug addiction, coming from there to doing this sort of stuff. And that's where I'm trying to find the purpose, to try and, show people or tell people just about like what happened, like I was on the brink. I did try and, kill myself, and I've been there, and I know what it's like to go back there. I think, one of the things with suicide is when you go to that place of that darkness, it sometimes it's easy to dip back in there, and I think to myself, like, if I did, that's why, I do the life that I do. I said, if I just had a normal job, or if I was, just chasing the financial stuff, I know I'd probably be back there now, so now I'm adamant about, chasing the adventure, chasing the fun, and chasing the playfulness in life. And that for me is, at the moment, is through this extreme stuff, and maybe I'll go back to just going for a surf or going snowboarding and just doing simple stuff. But at the moment it's the stuff that I'm doing,
So yeah, the 6633 Ultra, that's sort of one of, it's marketed as one of the toughest ultras on Earth. You've also done another one, which is also one of the toughest on Earth, which was the Yukon Arctic Ultra. Yeah. Which one was that? Did you do the 300 mile?
Yeah, I did the 300, it was actually this year in February. 300 miles, just it was probably a bit more than 300, just touched 500k, which was cool. So I obviously did the one last year, and then learned a few lessons from that, and then I wanted to come back and do the Yukon Arctic. Now the Likeys one, I just kind of the goal was just to finish it. I didn't really know that I could do that amount of mileage. So this year I came back and I was like, right, I'm gonna try and like push myself a bit more, see if I can be a bit more competitive, but obviously try and finish at the same time, which is hugely important because, like again, the completion rate for these, they're not very high. Like they're, less than 50%. People finish it, as compared to something like Marathon des Sables, which is billed as the toughest in the world, but it's 80-90% completion rate. It's like a marathon a day for 6-7 days, and then one ultra. Whereas like non-stop. I think non-stop races are they're definitely harder, and obviously, don't get me wrong, extreme heat is another end of the spectrum, but yeah, it was a really cool race. I really enjoyed it this year, and because I was much more prepared mentally for what was going to be involved compared to the year before. And yeah, I just got really stuck in, and like I got second with one of the fastest times that it ever been put up, and yeah, it was incredible. 5 days it took me to do that one.
So you seem to love these ultras in the snow,
yeah,
in like real far north, on the earth. You also did this year as well, Lake Baikal.
Yeah,
tell us about that.
Yeah, so obviously, I'd signed up for the row last year, and I was doing the ultra, and then I just wanted to do some sort of solo expedition in preparation for that in a lot of ways. So Lake Baikal had been on my radar for quite a while. If anyone's looked at photos, just Google Lake Baikal winter. It's freshwater, frozen freshwater is amazing to look at. It's the deepest freshwater lake in the world. 20% of the world's freshwater is there. It's 650 kilometers long. Not very wide, maybe 80, 90 kilometers at its widest, right in the middle of Siberia.
I actually had a look on Google where it was, but it's north of China. You've got Mongolia, and then it's north of Mongolia. So where's that? Right in the middle of Siberia?
Well, actually, it's probably not. Actually, it's probably more like southeast Siberia, to be quite honest.
Okay.
Yeah. But it's way over. It's actually you're basically, as I said, it's kind of the same time zone as Thailand. So you're getting over your neck of the woods. It's way over. It's like a 6-hour flight from Moscow, an internal flight. 6 hours. That's pretty crazy. And nobody speaks English over there. It's really like, not a lot of tourists there. It's out there. Yeah, it was definitely one of the most out there places I've been.
So was this like an organized thing, or was this like a solo expedition you did?
No, it was completely solo. Like there was actually a race there a couple of years ago, and it was held once, and then I'd seen reports of that, and I was kind of thinking, wow, I'd love if they held that again, and then then I kind of thought, well, actually, the idea came when I was last year. I was kind of a bit sick at the time, and I just kind of was like, wow, I kind of light bulb on off my head. I should just go and do it myself. And I kind of just looked into it. The flights weren't that expensive, and I had all the gear. It was essentially going to be using the same gear. Just a sled, all the cold weather stuff that I would have used, in the Arctic Ultras. So, I just sort of said, right, let's do this. So, tried to find people online who'd done it before, found a couple of guys, a Canadian guy, Ray Zahab, who had set the fastest known time, with a buddy of his. Got in touch with him and asked him a few questions, and managed to get another guy from Ireland, Mike O'Shea, who'd done it as well. And he put me in touch with a contact on the ground there who picked me up at the airport and dropped me to the bottom of the lake to start. So it kind of came together just about. It was completely solo. There was nothing organized. I just went there on my own with the sled and all the gear. The sled weighed over 60 kilos when I started. I basically took everything with me. All my travel bag, everything was in the sled, and my normal clothes and stuff like that. And I had 2 stoves, and I had 6 liters of fuel, and tent, all the gear, all the food and stuff. So I set off right to south, which was right in the beginning of March the 1st there of this year, and trekked north for 17 days along the ice.
And how far was this?
It actually came out on the GPS 706 kilometers in the end. So 706 kilometers in 17 days. So it's basically a marathon a day. I ran into trouble straight away. Pretty much the second day, my stove stopped working. I'd been using Russian petrol, which is the only thing available there. There's no white gas, camping gas in that part of the world. So I had a omni-fuel Primus stove, which didn't like the Russian petrol at all, and ended up completely crapping out. Got on the sat phone and managed to talk to the contact, and they were able to source another stove from the town they were in, and they came and met me the day after, which was really fortunate, because further north, further north along the lake, there's starts to get sparser and sparser. There's actually the last few hundred K, you don't see anybody. There's no towns or anything, So I was quite lucky early on. I was still close to a few villages, and they were able to come meet me on the shoreline and give me a new stove. So yeah, I'd kind of been eyeing the fastest known time, the FKT, from these Canadian guys, which was 13 and a half days, but I'd lost a day pretty much, picking up the stoves, and also they did it unsupported, and I had accepted the stoves as help, so I lost my status. But again, I didn't really mind. I was happy just to keep moving and finish the challenge and finish the route. I was very quick to throw the idea out the window and just get on with it, but it was more important obviously to make sure I had the right kit and make sure it was working, because it was going to get a lot more serious the further north I went. And it was quite funny. I actually ended up having, they brought me 2 new stoves. So I had 4 stoves, and they brought me paint thinner as well, because that was one of the fuels that burned, because I thought maybe the petrol wasn't working. So I had like 5 litres of paint thinner. I still had like over 5 litres of petrol and 4 stoves. So I had more kit and added more weight to the sled, even though I thought I'd be losing weight. But then eventually I got the other stove as the MSRs, which I should have had in the first place. It was a schoolboy era MSR, the best stoves, proven. Like Primus are good stoves, but they just don't hold up in the extremes. So yeah, I got the stoves working, and I was good to go then after that. But yeah, it threw up a lot of challenges. The winds on the lake there are incredibly strong. I faced a lot of very, very strong winds, where this the tent nearly got taken off at one night, and a few close calls for sure.
How thick is the ice that you're actually on Lake Baikal? It's actually frozen?
Yeah.
How thick is it?
It's completely frozen from sort of December through to April, and it's hard to say because it's fresh water. It definitely, like, there's going along on the ice, there's a lot of like fissure cracks, like stress fractures through the ice, because it's quite narrow, the lake, but it's long. And then what happens is it freezes over early on, then it thaws a bit, so like you get what's called jumble ice, which is just like, ice that's, been floating around in water, and then it like creates all these like ridges, and there's just piles of ice. Sometimes you just like, you have to walk around this big lump of ice, and you've just got to find routes, and you got to climb through some of this ice. And so yeah, looking down, you're just looking, you're thinking, man, the cracks only go down maybe a foot, 2 foot, so you think it could be 2 foot, but you see sometimes, and you look down, it's probably 2-3 meters, even. Yeah, so it's definitely thick, and there's cars and stuff that drive on there, and but you can't get away from thinking it's going to break sometimes, because there was some mornings I was walking along, and there was cracks developing right under my feet, like shooting out from my feet.
All right. And
that was very unnerving, and then the whole thing, actually, the whole place creaks and groans and makes noises all the time. You can hear it like stepping down and shuddering. And like I was camped on the ice. I had ice climbing screws as tent pegs, which are probably the most expensive tent pegs in the world. I had 10 or 12 of those, so that I was really secure to the ice. But it's quite unnerving, the first few nights when you're sleeping on the ice. And I ended up saying to myself, right, well, I'm going to sleep off the ice now this night, because I found a nice place along the shoreline. So I set up camp along the shore, and it was a lovely evening. The sun was going down, and I actually found a picnic table there, so I was able to eat my dinner normally. And but then as the sun went down, I'd been setting up the tent, and the tent wasn't holding very well in the snow, because it's very, very dry, light powder. It's continental snow, and it's very little water content. So the tent pegs weren't getting a lot of purchase, but I kind of said, I'll be okay, because it was a nice evening. And boy, was I wrong. I ended up waking up at 2 o'clock in the morning, where the winds had picked up, and that was my first experience of the the winds there, as I said, were very, very strong as anything I've ever encountered. And I've been down in Patagonia and Antarctica, and the tent nearly took off, and I was quite lucky. The one thing that saved me was I'd if anyone's done any winter camping, you don't get out and go to the toilet. You pee in a bottle, and I'd been emptying the bottle just outside the tent, so I'd reach my arm out and just pour it out. I'd done this a couple of times during the night, and I'd actually poured the pee onto where one of the pegs was, and it had frozen like this little ball right on the peg, and it had like a little ice cube of pee, and it held the tent. It was holding the tent in, so I was quite lucky. The tent didn't take off, and that was probably the one reason,
Now, I want to talk about the big one coming up. Do you think this one coming up in December, it's the Talisker Whisky Challenge?
Yeah, it's the Talisker Whisky Atlantic Challenge, yeah.
When did this idea pop into your mind? Was this like when you were down deep sea diving or on one of these expeditions? When did you sort of become aware of this challenge? Is this a yearly thing?
It's actually normally held biannually, but this is the first year it's held annually because Talisker, the new sponsors, I think it was called Woodvale before that, and It's been held on and off since '97. Actually, it's quite it's been quite a while since people have been doing it. This is actually the first year. They held that last year, and it's been held this year now. And I first heard of it. I was just, in the airport on my way to work, looking for a couple of books to buy, and I picked up one. I think it was called Blood, Sweat, and Tears or something like that. And it was in my peripheral, but I'd never really thought of it. I just thought, oh, that sounds a bit too crazy to do, or it just didn't really you wouldn't really. I just thought, nah, you wouldn't really want to do that, But then I picked up this book, and it was a good book. There was a lot of romanticism in it, which I love. It will easily snap me up. But then there was a lot of the realities, and then again, just from having done the ultras and the mountaineering and stuff, I just slowly over time, I suppose I'd start to think like, oh, I could probably have a go at that, and then. In the middle of the book, the guy had spoke about rowing in the middle of the night, on like a calm night, and there was like phosphorescent plankton that was stirring up with every stroke of the oar, and like there's like two pools of it like just disappearing off the back of the boat, and he's like looks up and he can see the Milky Way, and I know that's just probably one moment in the middle of a whole lot of monotony and pain and anguish, but I just thought, wow, I'd like to see what that's like, and I want to do that, So that was the initial spark, and that's kind of how everything has happened in my life. It's just been a simple spark where I'm like, right, yeah, that sounds cool, let's do it. And then, everything else comes after that, the fear, the doubt, how am I going to make this happen? But as soon as I get that spark, and I tend to just know that that's what I need to do, or that's the direction that I need to start to move in that direction. Yeah. I not long after that, I signed up for it. It's just been an absolute roller coaster since of trying to get ready for it, and it's happening in basically 6 months' time,
So tell us about your boat. Did you get that? Is that like a custom built boat, or are there people that sort of manufacture these boats that are designed for open ocean rowing? How did you get the boat?
Yeah, so my boat is so there's two classes in the race. There's a traditional class and a concept class. Now I've got a concept boat, which is it's a bit of a different design. It's to the traditional ocean rowboat. They've come around in the last few years. They're a lot faster. They've got a bit more windage. They catch a bit more of the wind, and they've got a flatter hull, so they surf a lot better, which is a good thing. I had mine built by a company called Rannoch, who specialize now. They've only, it's kind of I think it's in its infancy. I think it's definitely going to get a lot bigger over the years. I think there's actually, there's another race that goes, the Pacific race that goes from California to Hawaii, and apparently there's going to be another one doing the North Atlantic starting in a couple of years. So yeah, it sounds like it's going places. I got this boat built earlier this year. Now all this coincides with me basically becoming redundant last year as well. I was working for a company in the North Sea diving, on a regular sort of rotation. the price of oil, if anyone's aware, dropped there considerably last year, and we were made redundant, which is not a massive deal because a lot of divers will be sort of day rate divers anyway, so I've kind of taken a bit of a gamble in that I'm going for this row. It's costing a lot of money, and then I'm trying to give myself the job title of an adventurer, even though it doesn't pay very well at all. I've had to not go back working really. Well, I could have gone back working at the moment, but I've decided to go with staying home at the moment and preparing for the row, which is one of the best decisions I ever made because I've worked really hard over the years and saved a lot of money, and I had started investing it in funds and thinking about pensions and things like that, and now I haven't worked in a good 6 months. I mean, I've been to the Yukon, been to Siberia. I'm in the middle of preparing for one of the biggest challenges of my life, and it's incredibly exciting. And this is my life. It's for living right now. I'm not gonna sit around and work my arse off and save my money until I'm 60. I'm having a mini retirement right now, which involves use what I have, which is everything that my healthy body, my fit strong body, and my fit strong mind to do something really cool, which is row across the Atlantic.
What's your training look like for this? Do you have like an indoor rowing machine, or do you go to gym and just spend hours like on the rowing machine, or how are you approaching your training for this?
Yeah, it's been tough. I'm sitting right in front of the rower here. I get shudders when I look at it. It's a
tough machine.
Yeah,
it is tough.
I've definitely associated with a lot of pain over the years. I would have spent a lot of time training on there. It's a great fitness tool, the row machine, and I've as I said, done a lot of training where I've kind of like 2,000 meter rows and like 500 sets of 500 meters and kind of like all out stuff where you like row till you're almost sick sort of thing. So I've had to approach this a lot different. As I said, I got the rower here in the living room. And I'm obviously thinking long game here. There's no point in me getting on the machine and busting my ass. I've got to, row to low heart rate and row for a long time. So yeah, I generally do sort of 2 hour stints on the rower here at home, and that's because I'm going to probably work to that sort of routine when I'm on the boat. Like any of the people I've spoken to in the past, that's kind of what they do. Now, obviously, for me, it's a bit different. Most of the other people who are doing it, I'm rowing solo. Most like there's other solo rowers, but the majority of people who do it in pairs, threes or fours. So they do like a one row, one guy rows, the other guy sleeps. So I think I have to be a little bit more flexible in regards to how much time I spend. But I definitely want to have a routine on the boat. But yeah, so I'm rowing on the machine, and then I'm trying to get the boat out as much as possible to row, which has actually been a lot harder than I envisaged. I wouldn't have had I don't have any sailing experience or small boat experience like that. Obviously spent a lot of time at sea as a diver. I've got sort of basic seamanship sorted, but yeah, the boat is designed for downwind. It's the crossing that we make from the Canaries, from La Gomera and the Canaries to Antigua is along the sort of channel, we'll say, that people would sail across as well. It's you've got the North Equatorial Current that runs sort of east to west, and then you've got the trade winds that blow at your back during that time of year, and then it's starting in December, and the first thing, like 99% of people who don't know about sailing or ocean rowing or general will say like, oh my God, what are you doing going in December? It's like that's the middle of winter in Ireland and Europe, but it's actually the best time of year because those trades are the strongest, the currents are consistent, and then obviously when you get to the Caribbean there isn't any hurricanes because the hurricane season is around now on that side of the Atlantic. So yeah, as I said, training has been tough because in Ireland here I've actually Galway Bay where I'm living is a really good spot for training, but it's just getting in and out can be quite tough if the wind is blowing onshore. I can row against it, but I barely can get going at a knot.
Yep.
But then I can turn around and fly back in, so I can do like little loops of near where I have the boat. But yesterday was perfect because I rowed out for 20 kilometers and there was like very little wind, and then the wind picked up and I got blown back in where I was, flying along, surfing waves. So yeah, I'm just trying to spend as much time as I can in the boat and learning about it. So the actual physical training, I think, is probably the easy part. When it comes to the technical sort of, learning and the navigation, just the ins and outs of the boat. I've got a lot of equipment on there. I have solar panels. I've got power management issues. I have a water maker, desalinates the seawater, makes it drinkable. So and then I've all the equipment, the loose equipment, which is pretty extensive. I've like life rafts, and I've got like beacons and tracking devices, and I've got this a sea anchor, which is like a parachute that I can let off in bad weather to hold me so I don't get pushed back. So it's proved to be the most challenging thing just to put together as opposed to actually doing it, which I haven't done yet. Just to try to, and then obviously the cost is huge, and trying to get sponsors involved and do all that sort of stuff on the side. So the whole campaign, is like a full-time job and then some,
Yeah. So how long do you think, assuming you make it and, you don't capsize or whatever, have you got how long does it take to get across the Atlantic? Like on average, is it like an average sort of, is it how many months or how many sort of days does it take?
I think 62 months, 60 days is about the average. I think we're going to have 90 days of supplies. A lot comes down to the weather. So, as I was saying, the trade winds do blow predominantly with us along the way, but then there's storms, the North Atlantic storms, winter storms that track south, so you'll get head on with those when they do come. It just depends on the type of season. It could be a bad season, it could be a good season, so that all depends. There's a lot of factors, I'd like to say I'd like to do it under 50 days, but who knows? I'm just gonna have to get out there and put it together day by day and just see how it fares out.
And do you have any idea of how big the waves can get? If there's a storm, are they massive?
Yeah, pretty massive. Looking at like 40-foot open ocean swell. It's going to be quite the experience. I'm really looking forward to that.
Oh,
like I'm a surfer, I've surfed some, not 40 foot. I've surfed some pretty big waves myself. And I might, another thing that I've done is, I was a clubby, like you guys call him, a surf lifesaver. When I was younger as well, I did, paddle boarding on the knee board, so I sort of have a bit of experience with sort of running on, open swell or wind chop at least, but this is a whole other level. But yeah, and my boat is designed to ride these things. It's got a big huge, what they call a wave piercing bow. It's designed to sort of surf down big swells. So I'm looking forward to sort of getting out there and really getting stuck into that. It's going to be quite an incredible experience.
I actually interviewed a guy called John Beeden. I think it's on episode 9 on this podcast. He's done the Atlantic and he's also done the Pacific. Mm-hmm. So maybe if you want to have a listen to that, he gives out some good tips. One of the things he said was, I remember asking him if he had anything planned after the solo Pacific row, and he said that he was contemplating doing sort of arm wrestling because he sort of gave off the vibe that his forearms became like he sort of developed superhuman strength in his forearms, just from countless, gripping onto the oars. Yeah. So that was quite interesting.
Yeah, no, I'm looking at my hands right now. I've got a few blisters from 9 hours yesterday, and I woke up this morning and my hands were a bit tight, and I was just thinking to myself, okay, I did 45K yesterday, and I've got to do that twice a day for 50 days. So yeah, I think yeah, you'll end up developing either you won't be able to close your hand. You won't be able to close your hand fully, or yeah, as I said, superhuman style because it's very much there's a lot of upper body involved. You know, rowing. You know, again, you know, ocean rowing compared to like flat water rowing is it's so different. You know, you're the two oars aren't in the water at the same time. You know, one's getting caught if you're you know if your ship side to the waves. You know, it's sort of you know you're getting pushed all over the place and. It's all over the place, so it can be quite a an upper body intensive thing, you know.
Now, I just got a few questions for you regarding success. You know, just your success secrets.
Yeah.
How do you define success?
It's funny. There's a quote by this guy called James Altucher. He's like an entrepreneur guy, and he has a podcast as well. And his quote is, "Failure is a definition your brain came up with. So is success." And you know, I quite like that. You know, because I don't like to attach too much of anything. You know, to get too much into the ego and stuff. I think, you know, if you break it down, I suppose like failure, you know, is just learning experience. You know, success is, you know, whatever you define to be really. And for me, looking back on my life, you know, with regards to all the adventures, you know, yeah, some of them were successful in that I finished them, but the real success for me in my life has been getting clean and staying sober. You know, that has been the footing for everything that I've done, you know. So, you know, without a doubt, that's been my biggest success. You know, it doesn't matter if I row a bloody ocean or if I don't row an ocean, you know, like I'm out there doing that because I want to do it, you know, it's something fun and a good experience, you know. But like, if you want to talk about success, you know, let's talk about like, you know, getting clean and then staying clean, you know, which is the real tough stuff, you know. And, you know, I suppose that's always going to be the foundation to everything that I've done.
And what about who's the first person who comes to mind when you hear the word successful and why?
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, like if you think of like somebody who has like a lot of accolades, say, for example, so like, you know, straight away, you know, as a surfer, somebody who I consider hugely successful is Kelly Slater, because he's you know, won the world championships a number of times, and then he's also like adapted over the years as a surfer as well as that. You know, he's just incredibly consistent, and you know, it's like he's definitely up there with somebody I'd see as being hugely successful, you know. But then, you know, just I think normal people really, I get a lot of inspiration from normal people. Just, you know, I have this friend, she's been into like CrossFit and stuff, and she was struggling with it for a lot, and she just kept going. Now she's doing really well with, like, you know, a lot of girls have trouble with pull-ups, you know, and she's really developed some good strength with pull-ups over the years, and just little things like that, you know. People plugging away at stuff and being consistent, I think, is, for me, I always get inspiration from that sort of stuff. And I just think, yeah, I think it can come down to just, you know, it doesn't have to be a huge thing like winning 9 world titles, like success. It can be, you know, just getting the next thing done. That, like, for me right now, I'm sitting here and I've got a whiteboard with a whole bunch of stuff on it that I need to get done. And when I look at like all that stuff, it just, you know, makes me want to just, you know, shut the curtains and go to bed, because it just seems like insurmountable. But again, like, I can, if I just get one of those things done, it's just another step closer to getting me to, you know, to the start line across the Atlantic. And like, I just try and look at that as a success, and just mini goals as to how I'm progressing and breaking things down, you know.
With success habits, do you have any particular things that you do, you know, to try to improve by 1% every day? Is there anything that you sort of do, or, you know, to try and improve?
Yeah. Well, yes and no. I mean, like, I suppose if you go through Facebook anytime today, you'll probably come across some article that says 5 tips of successful people, what they do, you know, and then you'll read in and it'll be like, you know, I get up at 4 a.m. and I make my bed, and, you know, it's like, I just think there's something really wrong with that sort of mentality, that we have to, like, you know, there's certain things that we have to do. There's a formula to it, you know. And for me, you know, sometimes there isn't a formula, you know. I think if for me to be successful, successful tip, I think, would be to get out of the way a lot of the time, just to let the process happen. For me, I'm, in the middle of this thing, and I just got to move one step closer every day. Like, just going back to just getting one thing done, and I think it isn't a habit per se. It's just a sort of mental thing where I'm just like not going to give myself a hard time about stuff. I'm going to give myself a pat on the back, and that's just personal to me because I'm very, very driven. I don't have a problem with getting out of bed in the morning. I don't have a problem with going training. Like, I've done a couple of psychological tests before in the past, to help with like decision making in expeditions, and like I scored off the charts on the self-driven section, but I've very much did really bad on like giving myself a pat on the back. And I think people who are successful in what society calls successful, like these people are just like running around doing a million different things, entrepreneurs and business people, whatever, and getting up at 4 a.m. and all that, like they're incredibly driven people, like, but like, do they ever just back off and really give themselves a pat on the back and sometimes just not do anything? So like, I suppose my message would be to obviously stay focused, stay motivated to do what you're doing, but at the same time, like, give yourself a pat on the back for doing the most basic and little things.
How do you deal with that thought of, there's this constant thought that comes and goes in your mind, particularly, whether it's in life or in like on an ultra or on an expedition or whatever, there's this thought that says, oh, I can't do this. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, it's that's a great one. It's a great question, and it's a really important one for me. Because I've come from a lowly place within myself, with the alcohol and the drugs, and then I'm, sitting here talking to you, about to go and row the Atlantic in a couple of months. So that's a huge thing, because I wouldn't have believed that I could do anything like this before, But over time, I've developed, a sort of a belief that these things can happen, and the thing is, it's still there. That's the point. Like, everybody has it, and it's always there, and nobody is 100% free from it. That's what I believe in, and I'm never 100% free from the doubt, or from the, you're not going to be able to do this, you're making a silly mistake, and the thing that I have written on my mirror in my bathroom, along with a couple of my big lofty goals beyond the row, is stop listening to yourself and start talking to yourself. I've read it on I think an infographic or somewhere, and it's a huge thing for me, because the listening to yourself is the listening to the doubt and the listening to the fears, and you're not enough, or you're not going to be able to do this, or you're going to run out of money and you're going to be on the side of the street. And then the talking to yourself is, it's okay, you got this. You're gonna smash it. Like, you're gonna go and row the Atlantic, and who knows what's going to happen after them. But I've been all right up until this point. I haven't ended up on the streets or anything. And if I do, I do. But the point is as well, like that. A lot of the mentality nowadays is that, like, we got to squash all this. We got to squash this negative thinking. We got to squash this doubt, and we got to like just be this positive, beaming person that's like gets up in the morning and just doesn't see failure. Just is always thinking of success, and like that's again coming back to the Buddhism thing. That's like death. That's we have to accept the doubt, we have to accept the fear, and that's what I try to do. Like, I have these periods where I'm in it, and that's it. I'm just in it. Like, some days I get up and I'm like, yeah, okay, we're doing this, no problem. Then another day I wake up and I'm like, what am I doing? This is insane. Like, I need to get my head straight and go back, and I just realize I'm able to step back. Like, I always use the analogy of the Google Maps. You zoom out. I just sort of zoom out from my life, and I just become the observer, which is another Buddhism thing. You just observe your life, just be able to just be aware of what's happening, and not try and do some massive changes like we have to like all of a sudden change this negativity or this, it's just part of the process. Like, when I'm in the ultra or when I'm in the row or any sort of other expedition, it's like, yeah, you're going to have bad times, you're going to have good times. It's just the weather. The weather comes in, it changes, the clouds roll over, the weather gets bad, it changes. It's the same internally, So I just, for me, the message again is like just that I'm going to experience the doubt. I'm going to experience the fear, the idea that I'm going to fail. And then I'm going to come back and I'm going to not experience it and I'm going to go back into it. It's just in and out. And it's like, again, and that's one of the things that Buddhism has taught me. It's just acceptance, so accepting everything that's happening.
So why do you do this stuff? Like, why do you run hundreds of kilometers in the freezing cold? Why are you going to row hundreds of kilometers across the Atlantic Ocean? Why? Yeah, why? Why do you do all this stuff?
Yeah, still trying to figure that one out. I get asked that a bit as well, I think, I don't know. It's a hard one. I think the sort of the party line answer would be to make it about somebody else or to make it about some cause, and I think that's very noble. And I am raising money for charity, and I'm trying to make that a part of what I'm doing. And I have raised money in the past, but it's being 100% honest, it's something deeper than that, and it's something that I'm still trying to discover. And I suppose it's connection. I'm looking for connection. Like, I don't, if I was, just working a job and like I was before with the diving, and there was a period where I was, like focused on financial gain and sort of things like that, and I lost the connection that I get through these things, and like I was lost in a lot of ways, and like I feel right now that I've got purpose, and I feel like there's no stagnation, and I think when I'm focused on like this challenge or this next event or whatever it is, it just gives me desire and purpose. And like I was saying about the fear and all that, like I still get that every day, and I get that bad some days and good days, and I know that that's the right place to be, because it's like it's challenging me, and that's it. All comes back to the challenge as well, like the challenge of rowing the Atlantic, the challenge of problem solving on my own, being forced in that situation to make decisions, and like it's just, life has become very, very easy for a lot of people. We're not, we've got our warm showers and we've got our central heating and we've got, our nice cars, and like, we're not in touch with sort of the primal sort of self. We're not in touch with, really being pushed mentally and physically all in the same place, and, that's kind of what I'm after, and, I'd probably be suited if we had a zombie apocalypse, and but that's not going to happen anytime soon. But I think that I just feel like I'm a better person. I'm a better version of myself when I'm in these situations.
Yeah, well, it's fascinating talking to you and hearing your view from where you see life, and your approach to life, and how you sort of tackle those obstacles and how you overcome these things. I think it's really fascinating.
Thanks,
so
man.
Whereabouts can people find you online and follow your, the lead up to the Atlantic row, which is, I think, is that in December?
Yeah, it's due for offer about the 15th of December. I'm online at gavanhennigan.com. So it's GAVAN. Hennigan, HENNIGAN.com. And then I'm on all the social media stuff. So Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And my handle is SoloGav, but it's SOULOGAV. And definitely come check out the feed. There's hopefully getting a decent satellite hookup while I'm on the Atlantic, and hoping to be blogging and getting photos up daily while I'm out there, so definitely want to try and share the adventure as much as possible.
Yeah, good luck.
Yeah, cheers.
I'll definitely be following you, and I hope it's going to be hard, but I hope you come through.
Yeah, absolutely.
Before you go, I need to ask about Conor McGregor in Ireland. How big is Conor McGregor? Do you follow the UFC?
Yeah, I do actually. I'm not a massive fan, but I definitely watch it if it's convenient, and I'd definitely be a fan of Conor McGregor. I think it's unfortunate that he isn't fighting again. He's lost. Well, I know he's fighting Nick Diaz again, but a little bit of a mess, obviously, with the fights that he was in, and going up a couple of weight categories. Probably should have just hung out and fought Aldo again. But he's a big deal, because I think he has an incredible mentality. Aside from all the trash talk, and all that stuff that goes with fighting and stuff, if people are able to get past that, the fight game, I think he's got a great mentality and a great belief that a lot of Irish people don't have. We've been squashed from day one, by Britain and by the rest of the world in a lot of ways. And it's just intrinsic for Irish people to have a lot of self-doubt and really not to believe they're going to amount to too much. And it's kind of almost like a false humility kind of thing, where we don't have that, and I don't want to make us out to be down and out or anything, but we're not. But yeah, he's definitely shown what's possible, through an incredible mental fortitude, of just believing that he is good enough and is the best, and I think if you do listen to a lot of his interviews and stuff, like he's quite a deep thinker, and I do enjoy the majority of stuff that I hear him talk about.
Yeah, no, I'm a big fan.
Yeah,
but I just want to say thanks again for coming on to the podcast. A lot of the stuff you've done, it's super inspiring to me, and I'm guessing as well to all the listeners. And good luck with the row coming up. Good luck with your training, and we'll probably do a round 2 down the track. Yeah, I'd love to. Absolutely. Thanks a million for having me on. It's been a great chat. Yeah, cool. All right. Thanks a lot, Gav. Boom. Okay, it's over. Okay, cheers. All right.
You've just been listening to the Born to Kick-Ass podcast at borntokickass.com. If you liked what you heard and want more, please subscribe on iTunes. Give a 5-star rating and a kick-ass review. This really helps to boost our presence and continues to allow us to introduce you to the most fascinating people on the planet. Welcome aboard, and catch you next time.